Well, joining us now, usually a Monday regular, but gosh darn it, was Monday a busy day here.
Yeah, what happened on Monday? I can't remember.
There was some news Monday, but pleased to welcome John Shannon back to the program. Of course, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. We find him in Edmonton, the Alberta capital. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great, boys. Just out here to do a couple of hockey games. Kraken last night, Tampa tomorrow night. See what happens with the vaunted Oilers and how they can improve their playoff position.
Yeah, and it's exciting times in Western Canada outside of this market with the Flames and Oilers vying in those playoff spots. And, of course, Winnipeg atop the West. So,
well, it's exciting in this market, too. The Canucks have got Tampa, Colorado, and Edmonton coming through town. I mean,
yeah, fair enough. The opponents are exciting.
Teams.
Yeah, some marquee games here.
And listen, let's be honest about the Vancouver Canucks. Don't ever say they're not entertaining.
That's true.
Fair enough.
You know,
it's a good TV show.
It's in many ways we're in the entertainment industry, and this is a team that, with all its foibles, loves to score goals, can score goals. If they could ever find a way to stop scoring goals or stop allowing goals, then that to me is, and the players talk about it. Bruce talks about it. Is that for every 3 moves they make, there's 2 that are bad, and they get in trouble. So it's
yeah.
I guess that goes back to that word structure again, right?
Yeah, and in fairness, we have gone through seasons here where there's been all sorts of crap off the ice and 2-1 games on the ice. So quite right. They're far more entertaining this year than most. We were all sort of mouth agape at different moments on Monday when Jim Rutherford held court. John, what stuck out to you? What did you make of the press conference? Do you think he helped the cause of the Vancouver Canucks here with their fans at the very least?
Wow. The one thing that stuck out for me was I do think that the organization has heard some of the messaging. And there was a real need, and whether it was Jimmy saying it or somebody high up saying, we've got to get out there and start getting our message out there. You know, when he turned to, I think it was Craig McEwen, when he turned to Craig McEwen and say, no, I can stay. I'm going to stay as long as these guys have questions. That to me was a message that said, we have some fence mending to do here. Whether that fence mending was done successfully is I think, very subjective. I think Jim tried to be as honest as he could. And I'm not sure, and I'm reading the papers, listening to you guys, listening to others, I'm not sure that was as successful as people expected it to be, but creating some level of access, I think, was important for the hockey club.
Yeah, we'll get to the hockey stuff in a second, John. But you do know Jim fairly well, I think. And he said it, and I'm not accusing him of quote unquote lying. I think he has to say what I'm about to say. But when he says that he's not feeling ownership pressure, my radar just goes up, and I just think. And I feel for him because he has to say what he says. He's the employee here, and he has to do the bidding of the. I don't believe it. Do you think that this, like, decisions about Boudreau and stuff like that? Like, I just have to believe that Jim's under some pressure there.
Well, we've talked about that here before, and I have maintained that Jim is under no pressure, and I believe that he's under no pressure because I think that's the way he signed the deal, saying I'm going to come, but I'm in charge, and you can't meddle. And you have to. There's lots of other things to do. There's lots of other aspects. I won't and literally, I will not meddle in the business side, but you don't meddle in the hockey side because I know better. And I truly do believe that still. And maybe it's Pollyanna, but I think that he would not have come to this job because that's what happened in Pittsburgh in the end. Was he lost that authority, and he had outside guys, and put in brackets a guy named David Morehouse. He had outside guys coming in and trying to make hockey decisions, and that bothered the heck out of Jim. So he's at the age, he's got the reputation. If somebody approaches him for a job and he says, yeah, I'm going to do it, but I'm doing it on my terms. And I think that, and I think what you saw on Monday were Jim's terms, in so many different ways. And I think you could interpret almost everything he said in the press conference in his terms.
Okay, we'll cross-reference that with the Boudreau stuff then, because it just doesn't seem like Rutherford's way then to keep this going with Boudreau.
But when he says in an offhanded manner, well, aren't we tanking already? aren't we close to the bottom? Why make the change now when the end goal might be obvious anyway?
Oh,
I felt for Jim on Monday. I did, because he was trying hard. He really was trying hard to give as transparent a thought process that he has had with the hockey club, and then you make the judgment whether it worked or not.
And John, I think you're absolutely right when you talk about he's being as open and honest and candid as he can be, and it's subjective in terms of how it's received. We all come to it with our own different interpretations and biases. And of course, right now the Canucks do not have a lot of equity or goodwill built up with their fan base because there's been so much losing for so long.
Well, and Matt, to that point, and he did say this on Monday, is he can't speak to what occurred before he got here. And the only thing he can speak of about that side of it is the contracts he's had to bear.
Right.
And that became pretty obvious that, his hands are tied by a lot of the business dealings that have been done before.
Right. And so I guess what I would say is I think the candor on something like where you stand with Bo Horvat was pretty well received, even if people don't like that it's gotten to this point, even if people don't like that they chose JT Miller over Bo Horvat. But when he says, hey, we made Bo what we thought was a very fair offer based on what type of player and his production he was. And this year he's gone and shot the lights out, and now he wants market value, and I don't blame him, and we're probably not going to be able to make
that was Rutherford at his best.
Absolutely. And so we're at an impasse, and we're probably going to have to make changes to the court. That was, for me, perfect messaging. You may not have liked how it got there, but I think he gave the God's honest assessment of where they're at and provided a whole lot of clarity for the fan base. When he talked about how he has talked to replacement candidates for Bruce Boudreau, I think a lot of people just recoiled in this market, John, and went, why are you treating poor Bruce this way? And I think that's what Blake's question was getting at, is what is the holdup here? There should be at some point a mercy firing just so that people don't think you're, it's one thing that if it reflects on you poorly professionally, but I think it's starting to reflect poorly on them personally now with the treatment that Bruce has gotten here.
I can't argue with anything you said, Matt. And, the human side always comes out. Guy like Bruce has been down this rabbit hole before. That's why these guys get paid millions of dollars rather than thousands of dollars. It's hazard pay, if you want, more than anything else. And the other aspect of this is that Bruce is so likable. Bruce has been right in front of every camera every day they've asked him to. Yeah. They weren't chanting "Jim, there it is," in the building.
Doesn't have the ring.
Doesn't have the ring, and so you can understand why you guys feel that way. I feel a little bit that way. I think that the fan base feels that way. But I at the same time, I would say, without talking to anybody, is that, well, Bruce is pretty popular. Why would you get rid of him? But the inevitable is that Bruce will not be renewed. And so at what point do you make that change in order to let the coach in waiting make some decisions on who the core is?
Yeah, and I'm not sure he's as popular this year as he was last year, although Blake seems to think we're going to hear some serenades here during this homestand of Bruce.
I think win or lose.
Win or lose. Because the people know where it's at. And frankly, you can make a very good case that Bruce has done a poor job this year. that he's cost them points with some of the strategy and lineup decisions.
Can I just throw one thing at you that I haven't heard mentioned I think they really miss Scott Walker.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well,
No. Scott Walker came with Bruce initially. And Scotty, after the season, Scott went home for his own personal reasons. Anywhere Scott goes, he's successful. When he ran the Guelph Storm, very successful. Lots of players came out of Guelph because of this coaching of Scott Walker. Scott Walker, and this is not a knock at Mike Yeo. This is not a knock at any of the other guys that are at the bench. But Scott Walker is a valuable commodity in hockey, and they miss him, and I think Bruce misses him more than anything else.
Oh, for sure.
We've heard Brad Shaw more than Scott Walker, but we'll add Scott Walker to the mix too.
But here's the thing.
I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of that.
I'm not sure Shaw and Boudreau got along. If you want to argue that Shaw
they did not get along. They did not get along.
They did not. If you want to argue that Shaw was the tactician there, that
the defensive structure part
to coach the defensive structure part, I think that's fair. I think John is 100% right on Scott Walker because he was the most trusted deputy, and every coach needs that right-hand lieutenant that they
every
can
player,
trust
I
with
think,
their
loves
family.
Scott Walker.
I think that's probably fair too. There is a relationship with Yeo and Boudreau that goes back, but Yeo is as much a management decision as it was a Bruce Boudreau decision. At least that's my information. Yeah. But I think you're spot on, John, that he wasn't able to assemble the staff that he feels comfortable with. And if you're telling me that may have hurt some of the strategic and lineup decisions along the way here over the course of 40-some games, I can absolutely believe that.
Yeah, I mean, and if the face of and we talked about how entertaining this team is. Mistakes aside, these guys are trying. These guys are working their tails off. Even on this road trip where you felt the inevitable was going to happen, it wasn't for lack of trying.
No, and we talked about it yesterday. It sort of got lost Monday with everything that was going on, but commendable effort in Carolina. Warm your heart type of stuff, the way they played that third period and then the overtime and the shootout to get a win and go 1-4 when everything's going against you on the second of back-to-backs against the second best team in hockey.
Andrei Kuzmenko's still smiling, for God's sakes. I mean, they're finding a way to get to the finish line.
Speaking of Carolina, because there are reports out there, are Bo Horvat and Rod Brind'Amour not a match made in heaven, John? Like, is that not the perfect fit when you know both gentlemen and the way they play the game?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. As if Carolina needs another great face-off guy. The one thing that Carolina, and if you look at the Hurricanes and what they've done in the last 2 or 3 years, they have, if they've got themselves in trouble in a playoff game, they have not really been able to put any offense out there. And the way Bo's putting the puck in the net this year, and the guys around Don Waddell would be saying, "Hey, this guy fits perfectly into what we're doing." That would not surprise me, and that's why it wouldn't surprise me that in talking to people in Seattle too, that Seattle's missing, and they've said this publicly and said it privately, is we're missing that one big stud. We're missing the big stud. We have a good team. We have lots of depth. We have guys that are ready to burst out to be stars, but we don't have a star right now. And so that's why Seattle fits in there too. And by the way, so when Ron Francis comes from Carolina, the philosophy in Carolina, the philosophy in Seattle, they look pretty well similar, don't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of ties that bind there, including with the president of hockey operations of the Vancouver Canucks, who used to run that franchise.
Blake? It's getting more and more, clear that Rick Tocchet is the apple of their eye. What do you think reputationally Rick Tockett's coaching reputation is based on the couple snippets we've seen there? Is this the right Jedi to look for here?
Well, I think he'll be direct with the players. I think he'll simplify things for the players. I think that when you look at guys like what Pete DeBoer's done in Dallas and what Bruce Cassidy's done in Vegas and Rick Bowness has done in Winnipeg, it's that there's defined roles, there's defined discussions. That's what Rick Tocchet will do if he in fact is the next coach of the Canucks. I also think that he will have benefited being away from the game for a year and a half. being that close, being able to take a step back. If you look at all these guys that take a step back and analyze what the game looks like, spend a year and a half in broadcasting. Even the great Scotty Bowman did it in the late 80s, early 90s, came back as a better coach. And so
we've talked about this a bunch of times. Yeah, Alain Vigneault didn't fare too well that first go around. Second time around did just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And Alain
so that's
hated
part of it.
Yeah. And Alain hated his time outside of coaching. Like, didn't take to scouting, just wanted to coach.
I've worked a lot of guys like that. Herb Brooks was my favorite that way. Herb Brooks, we'd go to a morning skate, guys. We'd go to a morning skate, and we'd get in the car to go back to the hotel to have lunch, and Herb would be mad. And I said, "Why are you mad, Herb? You're just doing the game on television." And he says, "I can't believe they're running the power play that way." Herb, it's not your business. Stop. Do your job. Right. And when we sat with Brian Sutter one day, and he tried to help Brian Sutter cure his power play woes. I think we knew the end was near.
You can see Herb with the whistle again. Right. Brilliant performance by Kurt Russell, by the way, in Miracle
at the Agrodome.
Yes, right. Quite right. As mentioned, you're there in Edmonton, and we suspect that Ken Holland and the Edmonton Oilers are going to do something by way of adding a player to help the goal prevention in Edmonton. And you tell me you've been banging the drum on Luke Schenn there.
I have, yeah.
To the Oilers.
I do regular radio here in Edmonton too on 630 CHED with our pal Bob Stauffer, and he said, "What kind of player would fit in?" I said, "Well, I think a stay-at-home defenseman like Luke Schenn would be perfect." And I really don't care with a guy like Schenn whether he's a left side or a right side. Luke Schenn's going to give you every ounce of his talent in front of the net, and that's exactly what the Oilers are missing. And the Oilers know they're missing that stay-at-home safe guy. And Schenn's not expensive. He kind of fits the mold.
He's the right cap hit.
Well, and so I mean, Schenn's going to be one of the most sought after players at the deadline, in my opinion, around the league. I think that he fits in what every team wants, whether it's Tampa, going back to Tampa where he played so well and really reinvigorated his career, or Minnesota, or here.
And we have heard him connected in Minnesota and Tampa as well. John, lastly here, we would be remiss if we didn't ask for your 2 cents about the late, great Gino Odjick, who made quite an impact on the ice and off the ice, and, of course, most notably here with the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, actually, the last time I saw Gino in person was at Pat Quinn's funeral. I sat beside him at the funeral, and he looked pretty frail that day. And I think that we were all amazed over the next few years that he made such a resurgence and was able to, get many of the accolades at Rogers Arena for the things that he did as a Canuck. And, my memories of him as a player were, let's face it, he was Pavel Bure's bodyguard. That's what his job was. He allowed, like Semenko did in Edmonton with Gretzky, he allowed Pavel Bure to skate fearlessly on the ice, and he did his job. And it speaks volumes to why lots of us are in the game, is because those are the types of people we end up really enjoying and being around. And Gino was no different.
He also allowed Pavel Bure to skate with some ferociousness. Just ask Shane Churla, who got an elbow to his jaw. It probably made Pavel feel about 12 feet tall when he was out there.
That was part of it. That's what he did. But that was all Gino. And you know as well as I do, when Pavel came back, he wanted to make sure one player was alongside of it at the center ice, and that was Gino Odjick, right?
Yep. Marvelous stuff, John. Thank you for this. Again, thank you for your flexibility on the scheduling this week. We'll catch up next week, my friend.
Just don't ask me to be on Saturday or Sunday.
No, Saturday or Sundays. We'll never ask you for Saturdays or Sundays.
Fair.
You've got that promise. You've
Cheers.
worked enough Saturdays in your life, hockey.
Tell me
Canada
about it.
Guy.
Yeah.